أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعاديات ضبحا فالموريات قدحا فالمغيرات صبحا فأثرن به نقعا فوسطن به جمعا إن الإنسان لربه لكنود وإنه على ذلك لشهيد وإنه لحب الخير لشديد أفلا يعلم إذا بعثر ما في القبور وحصل ما في الصدور إن ربهم بهم يومئذ لخبير. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن استنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. اللهم اجعلنا منهم ومن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر آمين يا رب العالمين. ثم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Today inshallah ta'ala we are engaged in a study of Surat Al-ADIYAAT. This is the 100th surah of the Quran. I hope to finish the dars on this surah inshallah ta'ala in a single session. Last week we were covering the contents of the surah before this, surah number 99, Surah Al-Zilzal. And as you recall, Allah Azza wa Jal dedicates that surah to one catastrophic event, when the earth is going to shake and it's going to reveal its contents. This surah, as we explore this surah, we will discover that this surah actually justifies the events of the previous surah. In other words, the earth is going to reveal its contents. But what is it that led to this? What was happening before this that led to that eventual consequence? That's what we're going to study in this surah. So it's almost taking a step back in the next surah and providing as justification and evidence for the coming surah to come. Now, or for the coming events that are preceding. Now, what we're going to learn in this surah, inshallah ta'ala, is the attitude of the human being, the greed of the human being, the carelessness and the heedlessness of the human being, and the things he does on this earth without fear of any consequence. The human being does things on this earth without caring what is going to be the result of this. I'm not going to get caught, so I don't care. In the previous surah we learned he's going to be crying when the earth starts spilling its beans. يَوْمَئِذٍ تُحَدِّثُ أَخْبَارَهَا. What's he going to say? وَقَالَ الْإِنسَانِ مَا لَهَا. What's wrong with it? He's going to be shocked that the earth has all this record of everything he did. But this surah is about what in fact he was doing, what he was up to. This is another one of the surahs in which Allah Azza wa Jal begins by taking an oath. We've talked about oaths and the aqsam, the oaths in the Quran several times, but a few very cursory and fundamental points are important to mention. One of the challenges I have today, that's something I have to overcome inshallah ta'ala, is a cross between a thorough academic sort of study of the surah versus an appreciation of the flow and the rhetoric of the surah. When you start quoting what this one said and what this one said and what this one said, you can get lost in those quotes and stop keeping track of what Allah is saying and the flow of the argument. You know, we have to interject in between everything Allah says. We have to interject and then study at somewhat of a scholarly level the meaning of every word and the grammatical nuances and things like that. The benefit of that is, of course, we get depth in terms of what we're learning. But the disadvantage is you lose track of where it's going. You fail to see the bigger picture, right? And the flow of the argument. That's the disadvantage. So we have to kind of try to find a balance between both of those things. I want to start by saying that this surah is one of my favorites in the Quran when it comes to exploring the incredible logic of the Quran and the way in which the beautiful, creative way in which Allah sets up an argument. You know, the message of the Quran is very straightforward, very simple. But the power of the Quran is not just in what it says, but in how it says it. And this is a stellar example of how Allah presents an argument, how He sets up the mind of the listener in conveying a message to them in a powerful way. And we know this, of course. Powerful speech isn't just about the right kind of words or the right message. It's also about the right style, the way you say something. You know, a friend of yours can give you advice and you won't take it seriously. But somebody else gives you the same advice with much more forceful language or language that really hits your heart, even though in the end the advice is the same, you take it a lot more seriously because it was presented to you in a way that impacted you more. So that's the kind of thing we're going to try to explore, inshallah ta'ala, today. As a brief reminder again about the oaths, essentially in the Quran, there are two components when Allah takes an oath. The first component is called al-muqsam bihi, which in simple terms we'll call the object of the oath. And the other component is the muqsam alayhi, which is the subject of the oath. So in English, it's the object of the oath and the subject of the oath. Now what are these things? If I say to you in English, I swear by the sun, it's going to be a hot day, if I say that to you, right? Even though we're not supposed to say that because we only swear by Allah. But I'm only doing this for the purpose of example. If I say, I swear by the sun, it's going to be a hot day. Then the sun is the object of the oath. The sun is the object. It's going to be a hot day is the subject. Another example, if I say, I swear by my family, I will take revenge. Now I said, I swear by my family, I will take revenge. What's the object? My family. And what's the subject? I will take revenge. You understand the connection between the two? Now, in the Quran also you have the object of the oath and you have the subject of the oath. Different mufassirun have commented in various ways about the proper interpretation and proper study of the oaths in the Quran, the objects and the subjects. The most basic principle you have to keep in mind, inshallah ta'ala, is the object of the oath is always preparing you for the subject of the oath in the Quran. Whenever you study the object, it always has something to do with the subject. Now sometimes mufassirun did not keep in line with this principle. This is the most simplest principle of muqsam bihi and muqsam alayhi. They're connected together. But some mufassirun had the principle that no, the object is separate and the subject is separate. The two have nothing to do with each other, not necessarily. Okay? Now when you go by that line of argument, then there's room for attack. And what's the room for attack? Then you could say, well, why don't you take these oaths in this surah, these objects, and put them in that surah, and why don't you take those oaths from that surah and put them here? Because they're not connected with anything else, right? They're just independent in and of themselves, so what's the benefit of them? Why these oaths over here, and why those oaths over here? Why وَالتِّينِ وَالزَّيْتُونِ وَطُورِ السِّنِينَ وَهَذَا الْبَلَدِ الْأَمِينَ? Why those objects in that surah? Why وَالْعَصْرِ? That's an object of the oath. What's the subject? إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. That's the subject, right? So the stronger argument really is that the object, the muqsam bihi, is always rhetorically connected to the subject. Now, the purpose in ancient Arabic for taking an oath, nowadays we also say, I swear. We say that all the time. Now when I say I swear, one of the implications is I'm very serious. I'm not kidding around, I'm very, very serious. That's when I say I swear, right? Which is true in ancient Arabic also. But another function of taking an oath that is not the case anymore is the oath was used to get your attention. It wasn't just used to set up an argument, it was also used first to get your attention. Now why does a speaker feel the need to get your attention? Obviously because whatever he's saying, you don't think you're interested. You're not interested, so he has to do something to get your attention first. If he says something important and you're not paying attention, then the point is lost. Yes, he said what he had to say, but the point wasn't just to say it. The point was to convey that message to you so it reaches inside you. And it won't reach inside you until you're paying attention. You understand? So the subject, which is the actual point of this discussion, is not going to have any benefit until the audience is paying attention. So Allah Azza wa Jal uses the oaths to grab the attention of the kuffar in this surah. The kuffar are not paying attention. They're not paying attention to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They don't want to hear it. So Allah Azza wa Jal says something that immediately captures their attention. Now when you want to get somebody's attention, you have to talk about something that they want to hear. They don't want to hear what you have to say. They want to hear what they like, what they're interested in. So you keep this in the back of your mind as we begin the study of this surah. The first 5 ayat of this surah are oaths, aqsam. And so first thing we're going to learn as we go through the tafsir of these ayat is, these 5 ayat are dedicated to get the attention of the Arab. The entire purpose of them is to grab his attention. Now, you know many things about Arabs before Islam. One of the things you know is they lived in the desert. Another thing you may already know is they're pretty rough around the edges. They broke out into fights pretty easily. You so much as look at one guy from the different tribe the wrong way, and they're in a fight with each other for generations, right? And they're after each other's blood because some guy slapped some guy's sheep or something trivial like that, but they'll break out into feuds that are never ending. Now, the Arabs they also had this thing we call nowadays an entertainment industry. Okay? Now, our entertainment industry could be like videos and music and movies and things like that. But they don't have any of this stuff. They have none of this stuff. What do they have? How do they entertain themselves? Well, they entertain themselves with this thing we call poetry, which is not so much different from our times. Even today, some artist gets up there in front of 1,000 people and he's spitting out rhymes and everybody's bopping their head. And a few thousand years ago, this Arab guy, there's a bonfire, there's a couple of Bedouins sitting there, he's spitting his rhymes in Arabic and everybody's bopping their head. It's pretty much the same thing. It's the ancient version of a concert. And in music and in entertainment, you talk about subjects that people want to hear about. Nowadays, a songwriter might talk about cars or women or shamelessness or whatever people are into. They'll pick subjects that people want to hear about, right? They're not going to talk about justice and peace and family and values. Nobody cares. They're not going to talk about what your purpose in life is and you're going to be raised after you. They don't care. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to hear it. People have a subject they're interested in. One of the things the Arabs were really interested in was battle. Like we are, nowadays we are entertained by battle. We call them action movies, right? It's the same idea, right? They loved stories of battle, scenes of battle, poetry about battle, right? That's one thing they were obsessed with. Another thing we're obsessed with nowadays are cars, right? And their version of cars was what? Especially fast car. Horses. So we have horsepower and they had horses, but it's the same thing. In the end, it's horsepower, right? So they had that. They were very obsessed with that. These were the few things that really caught their attention. This surah begins with a series of oaths that are dedicated to two things: battle horses and the battlefield. We're going to learn in these 5 ayat, Allah is grabbing their attention with vivid language, all of which is dedicated to the battle horse and the scene of battle. So inshallah ta'ala, with that background, we begin the study of the first ayah. وَالْعَادِيَاتِ ضَبْحًا. Allah is taking an oath. And He says, I swear by Al-ADIYAAT. The word adiyah in Arabic, it comes from the word adu, which means to have animosity. But adi, the masculine form, is used for someone who's running in battle against the enemy. There's in battle, there's one thing you're preparing for the enemy or your enemies. But when you're actually running towards your enemy, and when somebody's running towards their enemy, they don't look left or right, they don't care about anything else. All they care about is, I'm going to kill that guy over there. They're charging towards him. Now that's the form of the word that's been used, وَالْعَادِيَاتِ. I swear by battle horses that are marching forward with animosity. That's what Allah swears by. Now do you think this is something that would get the Arabs' attention? Oh my goodness. For him, this is like the trailer of an action movie. You know what they do in trailers, right? They show you a little bit of the movie, and they build your interest. And right when they get to the most interesting part of the trailer, what do? They cut it short, say, pay us $10 next summer. Right? That's what they do. That's a strategy in trailers. Now this scene is being built, which in itself it's extremely exciting, this scene that Allah Azza wa Jal builds with these words. وَالْعَادِيَاتِ. The feminine plural. This at the end that you hear is what's called jam'a mu'annath salim, the feminine plural. So Allah is not swearing by horses that are males. He's actually swearing by mares, female horses. Why? Because they used to be faster in battle. The Arabs used to prefer the female horse over the male horse. So already this is not just any car, this is the exotic car. Right? This is the faster one. And it's headed right into battle. This is an action scene from the very beginning. Then Allah adds the ha'al dabha. أقسمه, this is Baydawi rahimahullah. He says, اعلم أن الضبح أصوات أنفاس الخيل إذا عدت. You should know the word dabha at the end is describing, you should know it's describing أنفاس الخيل, the breath, the panting of the horse when it's engaged in aggressive motion. You know when a horse is galloping really fast, you hear that like, that sound you hear? The word for that in Arabic is dabh. Dabh. By using that word, we're learning that this horse is going as fast as it can. It's going as fast as it can. And it's marching forward towards what? An enemy. How do we know there's an enemy ahead? Because of what word? وَالْعَادِيَاتِ. And Allah is swearing by the scene. So the Arab, who's got a very wild imagination, you know what he's imagining? He's sitting on top of this horse, and it's marching full speed, and he can even hear what? The panting. the dabh that's taking place of the horse. So it's completely engulfed and encapsulated by this image. Then he says, this is Al-Baydawi again, rahimahullah, he says, فَإِنَّهَا تَدُلُّ بِالْإِلْتِزَامِ عَلَى الضَّابِحَاتِ. By using the word, adiyat as an ism fa'il, what Allah is saying is these horses are known or were designed to be used in battle. There's a really fast car and it's sitting in a parking lot. That's not what it was designed for. It was designed to be floored, right? It was designed to be working on full throttle. That's when you see what it was made to do. By using the word al-adiyat in the active participle, the ism fa'il form, what Allah Azza wa Jalla is saying, it's finally getting to do what it was made to do. It's using its full potential. وَالْعَادِيَاتِ ضَبْحًا. Ash-Shawkani rahimahullah comments, وَالْعَادِيَاتِ جَمْعُ عَادِيَةٍ وَهِيَ الْجَارِيَةِ بِسُرْعَةٍ. Adiyat is the plural of adiyah, and it's the plural, and it means that which is moving with great speed, min al-adu, because of animosity. وَهُوَ الْمَشْيِ بِالسُّرْعَةِ, and it's movement with great speed. فَأَبْدَلَتِ الْوَاوِ بِالْكَسْرِ مَا قَبْلَهَا. This is a sort of a lesson in morphology. For those of you who don't know sarf, this won't make any sense. But adiyat, that ya at the end, is actually replacing with a waw. It's the original letters are ayn, dal, and waw. But sometimes when words are formulated in Arabic, one vowel is replaced with another. So that's really what he's talking about. I won't go more into it because I see the look of confusion on your face already. So dabhan, masdar mu'akkad li ism al-fa'il. This dabhan, what Al-Baydawi rahimahullah, actually Ash-Shawkani is saying rahimahullah, is being used at the end to emphasize that it's not taking a single break. That this panting is going on continuously and it's not taking a single break. Now this entire image that I'm painting for you so far is how many ayat thus far? Just one. وَالْعَادِيَاتِ ضَبْحًا. This is just the first two words. And already it's very, very powerful in its depiction. But the thing I want to share with you, inshallah ta'ala, without getting into more grammatical discourse, which in the end isn't really all that relevant, because the meaning comes out to be essentially the same. وَنَقَلَ أَهْلُ اللُّغَةِ أَنَّ أَصْلَ الضَّبْحِ لِلثَّعْلَبِ. This is very important. The linguists have commented, and they have archived, that the word dabh in Arabic isn't originally used for horses. It's secondarily used for horses. It is originally used for wolves. It's originally not used for horses, but for wolves. So now what we're learning here is Allah is comparing battle horses to what? A pack of wolves. And a pack of wolves does not attack an enemy that it thinks is stronger than itself. It attacks an enemy that it thinks is weaker, it can destroy them. They can devour the enemy. They're defenseless, right? So it shows the confidence of those who are engaged in this battle. They're going to go after their enemy like the wolves go after their prey. That's the image that's being captured just by the use of the word dabh in the ayah. There has been a difference of opinion among the mufassirun about the meaning of the word or the interpretation of adiyat. Some have actually called it the camels that are heading in the season of Hajj. That's what these camels, they're panting really hard, and that's what Allah is swearing by. There are two evidences against that. First of all, the rest of the language doesn't support it. That's the first evidence against it. The second evidence against it is that the entire surah has nothing to do with Hajj, nor is it a Madani surah where the injunctions of Hajj came down. It's a Makki surah, even an early Makki surah at that. So it doesn't connect with the rhetoric of the rest of the ayah. You will find these opinions in some tafsir. Why? Because the methodology of not connecting the object with the subject isn't there by some. Some people didn't accept that methodology. So when you disconnect the two, then you get 30 different opinions on what that is. It could be anything then. Anything that's moving fast. Anything that's panting. But if you connect it with the rest of the surah, now the meaning gets caged and it has a proper direction. And then, the mufassirun comment on it with precision. A couple of other comments about the word adiyat. Adi, a group that is adamant or on standby for pillaging and warfare. This is what we learn from Mufradatul Quran. The word adi is a group that is kind of waiting to attack, and it wants to pillage and destroy its enemy. Ada al-faras, the horse galloped aggressively, as the Arabic expression goes. Ta'ada al-qawmu, ta'ada, same root, it's used from the tafa'ul form. It means when a nation is racing against one another aggressively. So all of these words, all the implications are moving fast and being aggressive against an enemy. That's the bottom line in the words, وَالْعَادِيَاتِ ضَبْحًا. Now we come to the next ayah, فَالْمُورِيَاتِ قَدْحًا. The first thing to note here is the letter fa. Instead of wa, the first ayah was وَالْعَادِيَاتِ. The second one is فَالْمُورِيَاتِ, fa. This is a very, very important, subtle concept in especially understanding the oaths of the Qur'an. There are certain letters that are called huruf al-atf. Okay? They are, or adawat al-atf even. They are letters that connect a sentence to another. If this was a wa, then it would mean the first ayah is one scene and this ayah is a different scene. They're two different scenes. But if the first one is a wa and the second one is fa, which is what we find here, this is a continuation of the previous scene. This is not a new image. Now we're getting more details about the same scene. You understand? Now what happens sometimes is in the Qur'an you have وَالْمُرْسَلَاتِ عُرْفًا. It began with what? Wa. فَالْعَاصِفَاتِ عَصْفًا. Fa. So it's a new thing or a continuation? It's a continuation. But the next ayah, وَالنَّاشِرَاتِ نَشْرًا. Wa. Now it's a new scene. You understand? So two were connected, then the rest is connected. That's what's happening here. Wa. And now look, I'll read forward so I don't have to bring this up again. وَالْعَادِيَاتِ ضَبْحًا. فَالْمُورِيَاتِ قَدْحًا. فَالْمُغِيرَاتِ صُبْحًا. فَأَثَرْنَ بِهِ نَقْعًا. فَوَسَطْنَ بِهِ جَمْعًا. Do you see fa in all of them? That means all of that is what? One scene. All of that is one scene. They're not separate scenes. They are one continuous scene. And the evidence of that is fa. Had they been separate scenes, what would we have found? Wa. Which is what we found in Surah At-Teen. Different oaths. وَالتِّينِ وَالزَّيْتُونِ وَطُورِ سِينِينَ وَهَذَا الْبَلَدِ الْأَمِينَ. They were separate things. So they were separated by a waw. But here, they're one thing, so they're connected with a fa. You with me so far? So now we come to فَالْمُورِيَاتِ قَدْحًا. The word muriyat is also what's called in Arabic an ism fa'il. It's also plural and feminine, which means it's describing the same horses, that same band of horses that was marching forward and panting in the previous ayah. The other thing we learn here about the word, these muriyat, is that as they are running, the word ira, from which muriyat comes, is a description, it's an adjective for these horses. Ira is to cause sparks to fly when you strike something. You know, there are different kinds of starting fire. You know, in Arabic there's awqada, to start a fire also. There are like 10 words in Arabic in the Qur'an to start a fire. This is one of those words. Ira is one of 10 words to start a fire. So what does this word specifically mean? What kind of fire? You know when two things rub against each other and a fire starts? Like you rub rocks against each other, or rub wood against each other, dry things against each other, that sort of thing. By rubbing or by strike, when sparks or flames are produced, that is called ira. So Allah is saying these horses are causing fires. These horses are creators of fire as they are galloping. What does that mean? You know, the horse is running really fast, and it's got a horseshoe on, which is metal, and it strikes on the rock as it's running. And what happens every time the rock strikes? Sparks are flying. So they're basically creating a fire as they run. It's like that's added intensity to the scene, right? They're literally blazing a trail behind them. Now, فَالْمُورِيَاتِ. Then is the word qadha. Qadh in Arabic is a violent strike that is very loud. So it already has the implication of the spark flying. For example, by the way, in regards to the word ira, we also find it in the Qur'an, أَفَرَأَيْتُمُ النَّارَ الَّتِي تُورُونَ. Don't you see the fire that you cause, that you create by striking things together? The word qadha implies they're very loud gallops. Every strike is very, very loud and violent. So now this rider who is captured in the image of this surah, the horse was already running fast. It was already panting. And now as he's riding it, he looks down, what does he see? He sees these sparks flying. The scene got even more intense. Right? Just think of it as it's hard for us to develop the imagination of the ancient Arab, but just imagine, for your benefit, just imagine this is an action movie, and just try to picture this scene. Just try to picture this scene of these horses, just a small, adiyat by the way, jam'u qillah. So it's a small bunch of horses, less than 10. So it's a small group of bandits, if you will, very few, and they're marching forward and these sparks are flying. Then he says, فَالْمُغِيرَاتِ صُبْحًا. Then the next scene, مُغِيرَات. يُغِيرُ أَهْلَهَا عَلَى الْعَدُوِّ. ضَبْحًا أي فِي وَقْتِهِ. Let's take the meaning one at a time. We'll go to Al-Baydawi rahimahullah. They take their riders right on top of the enemy. Ighara in Arabic means to ambush. That's from the word mughirat. It means to ambush. So we're learning these horses now. First they were marching and galloping forward, but in the next ayah, they've already reached the enemy and it's time to